go. Start.
Good afternoon. Today is whatever day it is. Wait a minute. Sorry. Today is February 18th, and this is the Finance Committee meeting. And seeing that we have a quorum, I'm calling the meeting to order. And the first thing I need to do, since we're conducting the meeting virtually, is make sure everyone can hear and be heard. So I will call out your names as I see them on the screen and just indicate whether all is well in terms of audible. Andy?
I'm here.
Counselor Haneke?
Present.
Bernie?
Present.
Bob?
Present.
Tom?
Present.
Great. And I see
I'm getting a message from Amherst Media. They'd like a moment, if you don't mind.
Okay. We're waiting for Alicia in any case. So, Melissa, I shouldn't proceed while we're waiting for Amherst Media?
Yeah, they're trying to get their live thing started. Okay, they're good to go.
Yeah, I've called the meeting to order, so we will proceed now that Amherst Media is connected with us. We have a posted agenda, but there is at least one change on it. It had listed the second quarter financial report, and Melissa, that report was not ready for today, correct?
Right. Well, I actually just finished it like a half an hour ago, and I just found a typo in it. I'm happy to review it with you guys and then put it in the packet to follow up next meeting, or it's entirely up to you.
I will see what the committee's preference are. I see Alicia has joined us. Alicia, can you let us know whether you can hear and we can hear you?
Yes, thank you, Kathy.
Welcome. What is the committee's preference? Would you like to see it on the screen and put it in today's packet, or wait for 2 weeks? Anyone can voice an opinion.
If there's nothing urgent, we can take it up later after we have all the chance to read it.
Okay. You know, I'm not seeing, the other financial item we have is the referral to us of the Banks Community Center renovation and various items. And then we have the revised budget. Bernie, you had asked when the the other meetings met, if there was a revision on the budget document, that you'd be able to see it. So I had Melissa posted in this meeting for Finance Committee. I believe we also posted it for the council. So it is in the packet. If anyone has any questions on that.
I'm not seeing it on the Finance Committee page.
The
I'm missing it.
projections.
I'm seeing, what am I seeing? I'm seeing a budget projection on a BCG.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's the most up to date.
That's the
projections.
Okay, fine, thank you.
So for those who haven't seen it before, both, would you like to see it on the screen, and are there any questions? I mean, the big news was by adjusting some of the revenue streams and some of the expense estimates that the conclusion was we could do a 3.5% on operating budget. That's, I guess, the shortest summary I can do of major change on it.
Do you want me to put it on the screen, Kathy?
Again, I'm conscious of some people have seen it already. Bernie, would you like it? Bernie and Tom, would you like it up on the screen?
I have it in front of me here. I have another screen.
Okay,
documents on.
I'd appreciate seeing it on the screen if it could be posted. Sure.
sure. Let's go. Let's put it up.
Do I have the right screen up? Yeah,
Yeah. And it's right near, if you can make it a little bit bigger and then,
sure.
and I
And
think the
then
main thing,
close.
Melissa, is I don't know whether I summarized it appropriately, but just so for Tom and Bernie, and actually for
Yeah,
anyone who wasn't on, uh,
right.
when.
Sure. So I can walk through it real quick. So, so I went through each section last time again, and so I started with the property revenues, and so you can see that the total increase in the property revenues, the base property revenues is 3.5%, and the reason that it's higher than 2.5% is driven by new growth that has been certified since the end of calendar year 24, and for fiscal year 25, you can see it's $1.2 million. So that's what's the driver of making it more than the 2.5%. The other big driver for the increase of the overall 5.7% is, of course, the estimated debt exclusion, which we'll put in the actual amount of the debt exclusion when we get to when we finalize those numbers. But this is amount to be raised in the taxes that can only be spent on the school. So that increase is that full increase of 5.7% is not available for all. It's for that specific project. And then you can see that in the local receipts, in motor vehicle, hotel, motel, excise, and investment income, we tried to push those receipts to be a little more aggressive, or less conservative, I should say, than we have been in the past. And that's a significant increase over last year's local receipts estimates, with an 11% increase over the of last year's budgeted amount. And then state aid went up a little bit, about 2.8%, but you'll see further down in the expenses that unfortunately so did our assessments. So that becomes more of a wash in the our net increase to local receipts is less than 1% overall, when you adjust for the assessments. Other financing sources remain pretty much stable, and the increases are built into expenditures we have coming. So like ambulance went up slightly, but we're also buying it. We have projected to buy an ambulance in fiscal 2026 that will be part of what goes before JCPC. Debt for enterprises and CPA is predetermined by those committees. And this is just where we showed that revenue in and expenditure out further down. So each of the expenditure groups went up 3.5%. The reflection of the regional school going up by 5.5% is because we included in the base, as part of our increases, this 3.5 as part of the base, and then put 3.5% on that. So those two numbers added together is what comes to the 5.5% increase for the regional school district. In capital budgeting, the part that we look at here for the 10.5% increase is the regional assessment, our current debt service, our short-term debt service, and then everything else is cash capital. Money can move in and out of these four lines, and that's all part of this 10.5%, which is based on the tax base from above. The 2 million for the schools, again, separate tax revenue for that, separate expenditure for, it's not part of our 10.5% spending. And CPA money spent on debt is separate tax income spent separately and not part of the 10.5% of this. This right here is the important number to look at, the 6.7% or 6.7 million of capital expenditures in the general fund. Miscellaneous, our retirement assessment came in pretty good. It was only a 2.5% increase once we costed out all the expenditures to the different enterprise funds. And as in reviewing the guidance from the budget guidelines, the OPEB assessment has been budgeted 600,000 flat, same as last year, with no increase from the prior year. And then unappropriated uses, this is here where you see the increase in the state aid where it's been offset. We had increased by 500,000 in state aid, and now the assessments went up by 400,000, giving us about, I believe it's about 117 net difference in the increase. And right now we're projecting a small surplus of $36,000. That's just estimates on the local receipts, which will given we'll tighten up when we get a better number, or maybe changes from state aid. So that's just the summary of that report. If there are any other questions.
Yes, I see Bob's hand is up, and I also have a question.
Yeah, I just had a question on how the debt exclusion is going to be work. What are we going to estimate how much money we need over the next X amount of time and tax raise that in the taxes in the debt exclusion, or are we going to set up a separate stabilization fund, if you will, that we would put that tax revenue into and then draw down from it?
Nope. So the way that debt exclusion is that we have to put on the tax bill exactly what our payment is. And so when part of getting our tax rate certified, we enter in our debt schedule as the debt. But right now we haven't borrowed. Well, we've borrowed a small amount of it, but we haven't borrowed the second round. And when we know the exact payment of the second round, then we'll be able to put that in. So right now it's a it's a placeholder as an estimate that we've worked on with our financial advisors, but we are not allowed to tax in front of that at all. When we have the debt and when the debt is due is when we're allowed to put it on the tax bill.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe I can follow up on that, but I have a separate question. I'm just looking for any other hands. So, Melissa, as I understand it, because on the elementary school building committee, we've seen a flow of expected expenses on the construction. Where, as I understand, what you'll be doing is you're not going out initially for the full amount of what will be the town share. You're going out for it as you anticipated,
Right.
which is why we're seeing, when you had the 4 years out, we saw a different amount for debt exclusion in each of the years. Is that correct?
Right. So as we need it, we'll borrow it. And we may move up that borrowing in advance a little bit as it's not a good idea to borrow too far in advance of the construction, because there are penalties that can be paid, if you borrow in advance and hold on to funds. But as we know that we need the money, we'll borrow it. And the only reason to sort of decide to borrow more, let's say in the coming months, instead of borrowing, say, like, I don't know, I mean, it's $100 million project, right? So if we're going to borrow, we've borrowed $15 million already. If we borrowed another 20 tomorrow, in anticipating that we're going to spend a bulk of our funds really quickly, then we could do that tomorrow. Or we might say, well, you know what, maybe we should borrow 30 million, and then only borrow the last little bit at the end because maybe interest rates are rising. So that's a conversation that we'll have with our financial advisor. Is it better to borrow early than late? And how quickly are you spending the money? So that's, we have to look at the forecast of the cash flow forecast of how quickly we're going to need the money, how quickly we're going to spend it, because we have to spend it at a certain pace based on when we receive the money from the borrowing. And then we also kind of want to, if interest rates are on the rise, we would like to lock in now. So those are the conversations that we're having with our financial advisors right now. So that I actually have a meeting in about an hour. So I'll probably get off this meeting a little early today so that we can kind of have those conversations about what the timing is of the best time to do that. But we'll see those numbers change as we have more definitive information and as we make the decisions on how to stagger that borrowing or to borrow more aggressively based on market conditions.
Thank you. Tom, do you have a follow-up on the same item? Because I have a separate, I don't want to change the topic, so.
No, it's not on this topic.
Okay, so while we're on this page, Melissa,
Mhm.
can you explain to me why debt service current drops precipitously? And I'm comparing it to all the schedules we've had. It looks to me
Because
that
we
you're,
haven't put it in, we haven't put in any of the debt that we're going to borrow for next, you know what I mean? Like what's in there is what's actually outstanding, not what we're going to borrow for the coming projects that are in.
so this is a different way that we're noting it then, because before even though we haven't borrowed for the Jones Library, for example, it always showed up because we had appropriated money. So I think this is different than what we've done in the past.
No, I mean the the debt for the library would be in here, but see what like I was saying, these four numbers here, the highlights weird, but these four numbers, the region, the current, the short term, and the cash, they're all one number. So as that 6-7 is all that we have, and it's either debt or it's cash capital. And because the library project, we haven't borrowed for it yet because we haven't started the project yet. That may change next month. It might change in a few months, and then we would put that in if we were going to borrow for it. But if we're not going to borrow this year for it, there's no need to that money is available to do other things with.
So I can talk to you separately about this because it seems to me we've shifted a bit when I'm trying to crosswalk it with the tables we had at the end of last year for the capital improvement plan on where do some items show up? And it was a combination of projected versus not projected. So we're not having it in the projected line either. So we've been working with those on literally how much have we not authorized yet in terms of cash. So I don't want to press this up. It makes total sense that the total doesn't change. But just this sense of how much do we have to spend that we've not already committed to something else, even if we haven't started paying for it, those used to show up as subtracting out what we could spend in cash capital.
Right, but if you're not going to borrow in the current year, then you're subtracting it and not being able to use it.
Correct. And
And then, and and you are shrinking your cash available in this year and therefore lessening your 10.5%.
Right. So as I said, I don't want to prolong the
Yeah.
discussion because I'm trying to look at it versus when the capital expenditure has been less than projected for 2 years in a row because Jones didn't happen and we were carrying that amount of money. And so it ended up as not being spent. And this year, 2025 will be the same. Fiscal year 25 will be, since we haven't yet done it, we were carrying it. So I'll talk to you separately about how we show it within JCPC. Yeah. Tom?
Thank you, Kathy. Melissa, I really appreciate the layout. It's very clear and helpful. And I have a question. I know that we have a different item of the second quarter review, but I guess I just wondered what's most interesting to me on this is 26 versus 25. And to the extent that there's anything that you know of at this point in the year that you're reforecasting to be substantially in any way different from that center violet-headed column for the 25 budget, I guess I just would love to be reminded if there's anything that substantially changes the trajectory of change for one of these items.
So, I mean,
Forecast.
So you mean in the revenue parts?
Either the revenue or the expenses. Are there items that you're currently forecasting to be substantially different enough from budget that it would change the context of the 26 projection in terms of the degree of change?
So one thing that, has come up over and over again, so I might as well, and it's going to show in that when you read that quarterly, so I might as well talk about it, is that the interest income is much higher than it has been projected, even in fiscal 2025, and that is why we have increased the projected amount to 500,000. That being said, I do believe that we will close fiscal 2025 with significantly more than that 500,000. However, a big portion of a big reason for that is the amount of capital that we have funds for that we're holding, and the projects aren't moving as fast as we had anticipated. For example, the school project. So like I said, we had borrowed for this school project last spring, and that first construction bill was first paid in January. So you'll see that we have that $15 million in our coffers that our treasurer is investing. And, we're realizing some of the gains of the market in that. As we spend that down, I mean, we spent like in 1 week, we spent $1 million on that construction project. So that kind of pace of spending the money is going to move really fast, and then it will deplete those reserves. And so while that investment income is significantly high for fiscal 25, I look back further than that. And if you can, I did do a look back 20 years, and we had never been above 500,000 until we got to 2023. So that's why I'm leaving it at that sort of middle range number, and hoping that you appreciate that I am pushing my comfort levels, and that I hear you that yes, it is going to be higher in 2025, and we probably will have a surplus in that line item in 2025, but not so much that I personally would feel comfortable moving this number any higher than it already is.
Okay.
And I will say the other big factor is that we've done a couple of appropriations from free cash that you're aware of. At the council, well, maybe you're not, Tom, but at the council, they've done a couple appropriations for operating budgets, particularly into the sewer department.
Oh, yeah.
And that budget is significantly ahead of schedule, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that they have a something called sludge that they need to dispose of from the wastewater treatment plant, and the cost of doing that has risen significantly, and they asked for a large appropriation to cover the cost of that for this year. So that budget looks out of line, and so that budget has been adjusted
Is
with
that the-
with that council vote.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Bernie,
A little bit of a loaded question. The money that's been set aside for projects
Mhm.
that is now being invested, and we're
Mhm.
earning extra interest on, that's town money, correct?
Yes. So right. So general fund capital project is town money. But we do, hopefully we'll start spending the money really quickly, because in the instance of borrowed money, there can be penalties, arbitrage penalties for
Yeah,
holding
yeah,
that too long.
that's where I was going. That's where I was
Yeah.
going to. None of that looks like arbitrage, I hope.
We're cutting it close, but I think we're going to be okay.
Okay, and none of this is federal money.
No, well, it was. So we had the ARPA money in hand for for a number of years, and so
Uh-huh.
those monies we were investing until we spent it.
Okay, but in terms of, at least in terms of ARPA, if we've earned money, interest on our ARPA money that we're holding, we don't have to return that to the feds.
No, that grant did not work that way.
Okay, good. That was my other.
Mhm.
I
Some grants do. You are correct.
yes,
Some
yeah, I
grants,
know
yeah.
some grants do, because
Yeah.
I can
Mhm.
remember getting a nice nasty email from the Fed saying, "Hey,
Mhm.
you put this money in an interest-bearing account, give us the interest back." So yeah, all right. So we're careful about not getting ourselves trapped into
Mhm.
arbitrage, and
Mhm.
and this is basically town money that
Mhm.
we don't have to worry about any state or federal
Mhm.
tie-ins.
Yeah.
Bob,
Yeah, Bernie, just so you know, the ARPA money was different federal money than what you typically get. So we were allowed to, hold the money, put it in an interest-bearing account, and take advantage of the interest. Whereas normally with federal dollars, you can't do that.
Yeah, I that was my basic understanding. So it's more, checking my own beliefs
Mhm.
than anything else.
so I'm looking for any other hands. We actually segued by talking about this. We started to talk about what's in the second quarter report that we haven't seen yet, even though it was offered to us
Mhm.
sight unseen in the packet. So I suggest we'll make that the first item on the agenda for the next meeting. But
Okay.
to talk through as many of these issues as people can grapple with the numbers, including where we're getting, where we've budgeted for but not yet spent, which is what I understand why we're getting these high interest returns. You gave us one example of the school, and there may be a couple others that it's not sitting over in our stabilization fund or our capital reserve fund. This is interest on other items.
Mhm.
Any other questions on this? Then I think we can stop screen sharing. And I see we have minutes to approve, but only 5 sets were actually reviewed. But the other major item is the referral to us by the council for the Bangs Community Center. And I see that Bob Parent and Dave Zomack are in the audience. So are people ready to turn to that? And then we'll turn to minutes afterwards? Yes? Yes. So Melissa, if we can bring both Bob and Dave in, and maybe Rob Moore is also in the audience. I think all three of them have worked on this project. So we're basically turning the mic, such as it is on Zoom, over to whoever wants to start off. We had a brief presentation at the council about this with some summary items on charts, but we had not yet seen layout. We had not yet seen the full cost estimate for the project, and some of the thinking behind it. So I'm not sure who is leading on this discussion, Dave, Bob, Rob, or any combination of you. But the two of the finance committee members are not part of the council. So I think basically you should lead off with however you want to lead off.
So I'll start. So we did make the presentation a week ago Monday. Do you want us to redo that presentation, Kathy?
I don't think well, unless other members want you to, I think we'd like to get into the detail that we didn't have when you did the presentation and
So
in the,
what would you like to see? You have the document. How would you like us to proceed?
I think there's a summary set of charts that describes what is in the total costs, that is a presentation. There's a chart table that shows you what the items are. And
Okay.
then I don't know how many others had a chance to review this. I got to look at some of this last week as we were deciding what additional items would go in it. So the general conditions of the maps, the systems, I found interesting, and I have questions about the overall project and components of it. So maybe the best thing would be first get a presentation of what the components are that add up to the total.
Okay.
And just
So-
so everyone understands, this is coming out of ARPA money. So
Right.
it's not part of the cap. In fact, the capital plan has never had bangs on it at this level at all.
Okay,
Which
so-
is one of my questions, yeah.
So yeah, so Dave and Rob and Bob, do you want to get your cameras on so we can have a conversation? It'd be helpful. If you can do that.
I'm not certain we can do that.
Oh. Okay.
I'm not in the meeting. Oh, there we go.
So they came in through the audience link, it looks like.
If they're promoted to panelist instead of just allowed to talk, they would be.
I just promoted them.
Okay. So yeah, so just to frame this a little bit, so while this is considered ARPA money, it truly isn't ARPA money. It's the request to the council and the financial order to the council is an appropriation from free cash. So this is a request for free cash. The argument being that if you recall what I reported on at your meeting a week ago, in an effort to protect the ARPA funds that were unspent as of December 31, and that we were supposed to be allowed to spend over the course of the next year or two under the previous federal administration's rules about ARPA, we were not confident those rules would sustain into 2025. So we took proactive measures to protect those funds by allocating them as revenue replacement. Revenue replacement means that it will show up on the accounting as excess money in one of the account lines. I think we put it in health insurance just to be safe. And then that'll fall to free cash come June 30th. So the appropriation request to the council, which is what you're acting on, is $2.8 million from free cash. And I think one of the things why this now is, one of the council's goals for 2024 and 2025 was to address the needs of the senior center. And so since we had ARPA funds that were designated for this type of activity that could be utilized legitimately for this. That's why we began working in this direction. And when we got into it more deeply, and Rob and Bob can talk about this in a little more detail, we discovered that a significant amount of work would need to be done if there was going to be any work done on the senior center. It was going to trigger all kinds of code and health and safety improvements to the building. So when we got into that piece of it, we discovered that that was the bulk of the funds that we had available in terms of ARPA. So that sort of frames how we got to this point. And so we can get in more detail about, and I think maybe starting from ground, just baseline, like how did you approach it, and then how we came to this recommendation. Whoever would like to take that on.
I guess
Don't be
I
shy.
could start, since Rob spoke most of the last meeting. I'll pick up at the beginning of this meeting anyway, and certainly feel free. Hopefully you can hear me okay with the mask. Half the building department has flu right now, so we're trying to not spread it any further than we have to. So like any project, we like to start with a plan, start big, take a look at everything first, and then scale things back to what we can afford to do and what we decide is the highest priority. So where this project started was a needs analysis. The town retained an architect and again, Rob spoke to much of this at the full town council meeting last week, but we retained an architect who also retained a senior center consultant. The architect, EDM, interviewed each one of the town departments, one department at a time, so as to be able to get, sort of their independent, objective feelings and ideas regarding what their needs of each department were. They compiled those needs into one of the documents, I believe, that have been shared with you. Based on that document, we then asked the architect EDM, and this is all happening over a period of just a couple of months. It all happened fairly quickly, was to take a look, big picture, schematic design level, what might it take to meet those needs with, or at least as best we could within the building that we had within the bank center. And that ended up in a overall schematic design concept and an overall budget that was much greater than we could afford to do. We then said, okay, what needs to be done first? And became very apparent that because of the funds that have been invested in the building in the recent past, and these funds, that we are going to trigger the need to upgrade the building from a code compliance standpoint. A number of things would get triggered: ADA accessibility, sprinkler system requirements, and upgrading other mechanical systems that are necessary to serve the building as a whole, to then be able to serve some of the individual needs of the users of the building. So that's sort of generally how we ended up where we ended up. I don't know, Kathy, one of the items that we provided was the presentation that we made to the town departments within the Banks Community Center. Is that, can be, that be loaded up?
That's a good one, because it shows what's in it and what's not in it.
Sure. So my words up to this point sort of talked about how did we get to this point? And this is the point that we're at now, right now, and we're requesting authorization for funding for. And I'm going to peel off my, just 1 second.
Melissa, can you share that document?
It's called Bangs Community Center. What's the name of it? It's Presentation to Bangs Department is the name of it.
That was item number 11.
It's item number 11.
Okay.
That's it.
So working with our design team, we made a point of trying to keep people up to speed recognizing that sometimes there are different needs within the Bang Center and sometimes competing needs within the Bang Center. So we tried to share information as it became available to the group as a whole. So this is a presentation we made, I believe it was November 21st, to the group as a whole, and kind of laid out where we are today. So who has control of this? Is it?
Do you, what,
Just want to step down to the next page.
okay.
So the current project that we're talking about right now has these 4 items as the base components of the project. And then the item number 5 would be additional items that we would implement subject to the results of the bids and the availability of funding using alternates as we had, for instance, similar to the approach on the track and field project recently. So the first item is a new sprinkler system across the entire building. The building is not currently sprinklered. The second item, as you can see, is the fire alarm system, upgrading that system to a fully addressable system, which is required by code these days. The building and all the town buildings were subject to an accessibility review that was done a couple of years ago. And there were a number of shortcomings identified in this building from an AAB and ADA compliance standpoint. And that's what you see in this item number 3. And then one thing that came across based on input from all of the users of the building is there's a number of heating and cooling problems throughout the building. So that was an item that we wanted to try to address because it really, you want to address those things that happen above the ceiling, behind the walls, before you think about making any improvements to the ceilings or the walls or the finishes ultimately of the finished space. So you kind of have to knock those things off first before you can then dig into some of the other improvements. We then looked at trying to identify, because we knew at this point we weren't going to have a lot of funding available, at some relatively small scale improvements that might add some benefit to some of the users in the building. And that's what you see as item number 5. And we can look at in a little bit more detail. And before we jump off this, I don't know, Rob, do you have anything you want to add here, or am I jumping into this? Okay.
No, you're doing great. Thanks.
Good. Yeah, I'm not used to it. The first time I've tried to make a presentation with a mask on, so it's a little bit different. So what you see here is the basement level plan. There aren't any proposed improvements in this space planned as part of this current phase. You know, the thought is there can definitely be future phases, and that we want to set this building up to be able to be improved in the future. We don't want to do something that is, you know, gets in the way of future improvements or doesn't have the future improvements in mind. The next slide, please, Melissa. So we can move up floor by floor. This is the basement level. Obviously, you can't, on this plan, you can't see the sprinkler system, you can't see the fire alarm system, you can't see the accessibility improvements. Those are all happening across the entire building. So the alternates I spoke about, one of them that was most appealing to be implemented by the senior center would be to move the health department from the first floor up to the second floor. By doing that, that would allow the senior center to be fully located on a single floor and allow them to create a conference space as well as a fitness space on the first floor. And that's the alternate that you see on the top right there. Let's see, another item that was discussed was, let me see, it's breathing and speaking is not quite as easy with the mask as it is without a mask on, but is down at the first level adjoining the multi-purpose room. There's currently the nurse's office located in that space. There is a strong desire to be able to have a restroom facility adjoining that space. Whether it would be in conjunction with a kitchen upgrade that might happen in the future or not, there was still a strong desire to be able to make that space work better by having a restroom facility directly adjacent to it. Let's see. Up on the second level, there was a desire to provide some additional conference room space, and that's what you see here circled as an alternate. And this, as you see in this layout, shows the health department moving to the second floor. That does, as I understand, based on input from the health department and from press, create some challenges for them. But that is what would have to happen in order to allow the senior center to be located on the first floor, as you saw in the previous slide.
If I can jump in there, so just so these are not this is what was presented back in November, and we've gotten substantial feedback from the users of the building since then. So, there's been some other options that have been developed, with a goal being to get an exercise room for the senior center. The health department has expressed an interest in staying on the first floor to promote accessibility to their services. So there's a lot of things in terms of what the desires of the people who occupy the building are still they're conveying to us.
One of the significant pieces of this project that you don't see because it's happening behind the scenes is the HVAC improvements, and I want to explain those a little bit. We spent a fair amount of time looking at the HVAC system and looking at alternatives in terms of how that system could be improved and create a system that would be serviceable for the next 20 or 30 years. And we did learn a lot of things about the existing system. One thing that we learned is that the existing system, particularly the ductwork, is kind of a patchwork right now. It's been modified and cut into a number of times in the past. And as a result of that happening, the system isn't working as well as it should, even with the old equipment that's there. That's part of the problem. That's part of some of the things that need to be addressed through improvements to the HVAC system is to get rid of some of those patchwork type of modifications that had been made over the years. Let's see. I'm just trying to think about where else your questions might come from. I don't know if you have any questions or any specific items you'd like us to respond to.
Andy, and I think it would be, just so everyone knows, before this set came, there's an assessment of existing conditions report, and I'm not sure it's in the packet or not, but it was looking at some of these issues about airflow and ductwork. And then there was, and I just checked, it is in the packet, the overall cost, because we're looking at a phase 1 right now, and some schematic. So I will ask some questions about those after I hear from both Andy and Mandy. Andy.
Okay, well, I'll ask my question and add one other thing to just throw in at the end. My question is about the swing space, and what space were you thinking of using for that, and what are the economic cost factors that we incur because of the need to use swing space?
Could you clarify what you mean by swing space? Which space you're referring to?
On the page that's right on the screen right now, number 3, swing space usually, it's my understanding is that it's when we have to find space outside of the building because there needs to be construction going on in the building that doesn't allow all services to be offered within the building itself. So, but if that definition doesn't apply to this particular project, I just was trying to find out what is meant and what are the economic consequences.
Thank you. I understand better now. The swing space that we're referring to is within the building itself. We don't anticipate the need to move people out of the building, but the concept would be to phase this project, or to I don't want to call phase it, but have this project implemented in a manner such that when necessary, staff could be shifted around the building on a temporary basis. We would start this project off with space on the second floor that is not currently fully utilized. So that would be, that is available today as swing space. That would ultimately be fit out and used, as I indicated, by the health department moving to the second floor, adjoining Crest and shuffling Crest and the health department around, if that is feasible. But that's the swing space that's being referred to as having a starting point within the building that we could shuffle people around while construction is ongoing. And again, starting with the second floor.
So it would not involve renting space, and the move would be minimal cost because it's within the building. The other thing I was just going to mention for the record is that there was one of the things that we received was initial layout of the building, or current layout of the building, and there was a misspelling of Musanti a couple of places in there, and just not, if we're going to continue to use that as a courtesy to the Musanti family, to make sure that gets spelled correctly. But thank you.
Mandy?
Thank you, and thank you for the drawings, and all of the new information that came with the drawings. I have a question regarding the deductive alternates on the cost estimate. They are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm curious whether there is any priority order. I'm not sure this is the priority order, but that's why I'm asking. Is there a priority order for the deductive alternates if there is money available? And also, are there any deductive alternates that must go together? I ask that because I look at if you create 2 new restrooms near the large activity room, you've lost the nurse's office. And so if you would only have enough money, say, to create the restrooms near the large activity room, what's the plan for the nurse's office if you don't do that one too? So are there some that need to go together, others that don't? And is there a priority on what you would pick for those?
To the last question, there is no priority set at this point. Different users in the building may have different preferences regarding what they would like to see done first or last. And that's part of the challenge of this project, is that, you know, there's a lot of things happening within the building at the same time, and sometimes some conflicting needs and wants within the building. So we have not established a priority at this point. To the question of the nurse's office, that would have to relocate to the second floor along with the health department, unless I'm wrong, Rob. So feel free to correct me at any point, because I don't have the hands-on understanding of the working of the building as well as some others might. But in general, we don't anticipate any of the. We think these alternates are largely standalone, but they have different impacts. Particularly, again, the one that we show is number, let's see, number
Melissa,
3
this
right
is-
now has the greatest impact because it forces a health department relocation.
This is item number 12, Melissa, if you want to put it up, the one that Mandy and Bob are talking off of. I'm correct, Mandy, right? The one where you see the list of, so people
Yes.
see what 1, 2, 3, and 4 might look like. Yeah, that's the document.
Rob,
So
did
what
you
I was
want,
sorry.
Rob, did you want to address the, I think the nurses would go.
I think I think Bob's, as he stated, we would, attempt to use any of the vacant space for any temporary arrangements that are needed. But as Mandy pointed out, if we if we wanted to move ahead with the restroom at the large activity room, we would in fact have to first do the nurse's station off of room 101 as that would become our number one alternate, just so we can move into our maybe preferable alternate of creating the bathroom at the large activity room. So those do have to happen in that order for the completion of the project.
Thank you.
Other questions before I get to mine? Okay, so I'll jump in. I have an overarching question on when I looked at the existing conditions and they went through the various functioning systems. There was no mention of roof. So I wanted to know, because at one point in the JCPC discussion, we've got an allowance in the capital budget for a number of years of 500,000 each year. And Bang's roof was one of the things that was flagged as potentially needed work on it. So did we look at roof is just a basic question. And I'll rattle off on these. Then I'm struck by what I think I'm seeing is that we're really not, with this expenditure, getting any expansion of the amount of space seniors have with maybe if we do this exercise room. But right now, it's not an expansion. It's mainly working on systems. So my other question in reading about the systems is it seemed like the airflow. So Bob, you just spoke about the ductwork being patchwork, but in the report on what's happening is there cold spots and hot spots in the building. And could you correct them by putting mini splits in the area, which would give heat, humidity, and cold air and circulation at a lower cost than the 2.3 million that is in phase one on MEPS? So it was a question on could we lower the costs? Because just so the total cost of everything that was looked at is verging on $7 or $8 million, and we've got something called phase one. It's not clear to me that we've got a phase two in our capital budget. So I just had a question both about roof, mini splits, and then to what extent are elements that are in this project there is in the estimates, the schematic design estimates. It has a fairly large amount of money on windows. Over in the capital request is $175,000 for Bang's windows. Would this expenditure offset the cost to the capital plan? No longer, because it would address whatever the windows issues are. So starting out with roof, second mini splits, and then do we offset some of the alternative costs?
Bob, I'll
Hey,
start.
Kath, I need to get off. I have another meeting at 3. So I've made Dave host, but I'm gonna stop sharing.
So you've made who host?
I've made Dave Zomac host.
But is Dave still here? I thought I saw him leaving too.
Dave is here.
Okay.
I don't have access
Okay.
to all the documents.
Do you want me to
That's,
make Kathy host instead?
I would make Kathy, or is Holly still here?
If you make me
Oh.
host,
Yeah, Kathy, if you have other questions that regarding calling up documents, sure, make us both,
yeah.
co-hosts, and then Kathy can call up a document she needs.
Oh, so I can't, because I made you host, I can't I can't make other people host yet. So if you want to give it away,
Yep.
apologize.
This works, Melissa. You've got me on as co-host, so this is going to
Okay.
work.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Gotcha.
Sorry.
Thanks, Melissa. No worries.
So I'm not sure on those documents that the existing condition document, I don't think it's in the packet, but the schematic design that has the line for windows in. So my my question really is about, is there a way of lowering the total cost of this? Because we're not getting a new heating system. We're not getting new boilers. We're not shifting off of fossil fuels. So I was looking for a way to lower the costs with thinking that some of this money could go into, and I come up with some other ideas of using the money. But in any case, I was just struck by we're not getting a lot more space. We always talked about this as a senior center, but we're not getting a lot more space for seniors. And we're doing systems on Bangs, and Bangs wasn't on the list of major capital projects until now. So roof mini splits is an alternative to redoing the whole ducting system. And does windows, if we made those spending in this project, would we free up some of the money that was slated to come out of capital?
So Bob, if you don't mind, I'll give it a start. Yeah, so the roof, one thing I wanted to mention is that we are in the middle of a facilities conditions assessment for 11 of our buildings with an outside firm, and we're looking at identifying a lot of these issues to help better inform capital planning going forward. That's not complete, but in the draft form, we do have a little bit of information about the Bangs roof in their way of scoring and rating systems. The roof is broken up into a couple large areas of flat roof mostly, and range in kind of the mid-range of its condition. So what we're looking at is a roof that doesn't have its full life left to it. There are recommendations that are looking like in the 6 to 10 year range, and then longer term recommendations. So we want to investigate that further before we look at the possibility of adding any significant equipment on the rooftop. We don't know of any major problems with the roof condition or actively addressing it. That line item in our capital plan is general to roofs on multiple buildings, and we have multiple buildings that need roofs. This one may not be the priority at the moment for that type of funding. So we're continuing to look at that, and we'll want to look at that in the future before we add more equipment. Switching over to the systems, mini split system, certainly has its advantages if we were looking at, one room at a time or one location of the building and trying to increase comfort and usage. It's not what we're looking at for long term for this building. It's not the right system. Just besides the aesthetic disadvantage of having 30 to 50 pieces of equipment either on the ground along the side of the building mounted on brackets, or if we're able to fit it on the roof area. Mini splits do not provide ventilation, and one of the major problems in this building is ventilation. And I know not all of you read the report, but if what you'd see is that some of our rooftop units are not functioning year round because they're not designed to. They don't actually heat the air that's being brought in from the outside to provide a comfort, a better air quality in the building. And therefore they're shut down because they create cold spots in the building. So it's one piece of a problem with the entire HVAC system. As Bob mentioned, there's multiple areas where ductwork needs to be significantly reworked, and some where just minor adjustments are needed. But basically all the pieces of equipment need to be addressed in one way or the other. And the major rooftop units would be, through this project, would be swapped over to ones that provide the right ventilation and humidity and temperature adjustments to the air coming in and coming out of the building to improve and make a more comfortable space to be in. And also be of heat pump technology, which is taking us to a step closer to where we ultimately want to be when we address the central heating plant. We have already identified a potential partnering of a project with this one through a significant grant opportunity that's available for decarbonization that might be able to address removing the building off of fossil fuels. We're looking at that aggressively with the design team and hoping to have a design that we could get together for a next round potentially to seek that funding and couple it with this project. There are no windows in this project. The glass and glazing and what's referred to in the window categories is all interior work. It's the storefront to the senior center area. It's to provide a better openness to the senior center activity areas, and does not address the building envelope windows that we are hoping to pick away at through our capital plan. So the $175,000 is a capital plan item that was increased from, I think it started back in 2018 when I started helping out a little bit in facilities department. There was a $60,000 request that was funded and realized quickly that didn't do much. So the $175,000 request in the capital plan was intended to replace the windows in what is now the senior center primary space, not any of these potentially expanded spaces, but really one portion of the building. And that's not included in the renovation phase being proposed here in this request.
So when I saw glass, it wasn't windows, is what you're telling me.
It's not. I know it says windows, but if you read the the finer print, it's describing a storefront that references the proposed plans, and that's interior. And if if we come back to the proposed layouts, you'll see that there is some storefront proposed along the main corridor of what is now the health office and the first portion of the senior center, and then there's some more up on the upper floor as well.
Can I ask Rob if we thought the windows needed to be replaced in the senior center, is that was the one in the general conditions summary that gets the too much heat, too cold kind of, is that partially faulty windows, that they're not triple paned, that they're not providing
Sure.
insulation?
Sure, it contributes to it, and we actually did ask the engineer that. So, when Bob was describing the design team here, we have much of this was work with EDM and their mechanical engineer team, which is another subconsultant to EDM, and that was discussed. And I guess the recommendation from the design team was that, yes, it's important, it needs to be addressed, but it didn't significantly change any of the sizing, any of the approach to getting to where we need to be. And the system as they are designing it would function without doing that work on the windows at the moment, although we do want to work towards that. And there are some things that could be done with reflective film, to help certain spaces. But we didn't look closely at that, thinking that we'll move ahead with our capital plan and continue to address envelope issues in the building.
The
Bernie?
biggest issue, because we asked about it relative to windows and losses and gains of the windows, is the orientation of the building. The way that the building is oriented relative to, the sun and shady areas. And then that is something that we can't change. We can only address that through moving air inside of the building. Moving warm air when we need warm air, and moving cool air when we need cool air. Because we're not going to relocate the building orientation.
Bernie?
Yeah, I'm frankly not surprised over the first four the four improvements that you've tagged here. They're pretty basic, and I agree with the logic that before you're going to do anything else, you need to get the inside, the hidden systems all working and functional. I'm also glad to hear that in terms of the HVAC, you're going to be looking at new equipment, and you're going to be looking at a uniform control system that can really make the building more usable and more comfortable that way. My other little editorial remark would be is that because you're pinched for money, it's wise to ignore the windows unless they're cracked and need a physical replacement, because window replacement gives you probably the least bang for your buck in terms of energy saving. And I think um, was it one of the speakers mentioned the idea of maybe doing some interior treatment with the windows, foil or some other system like that would probably be the best route to go. So I appreciate the amount of work and thought that's gone into this and in trying to balance the systems out. I also appreciate that this is the kind of work where people are going to say, "Oh, you spent all that money. Well, where did it go?" Because you don't see it. But thank you, gentlemen.
I see Mandy and then Andy.
A follow-up on the HVAC upgrades. It sounds like there's been patchwork before that's causing some of these problems, and we might be doing different patchworking. And I guess my question relates to our climate goals and the goal to have everything off fossil fuels by 2050. And it sounds like this might not get us off fossil fuels in this building. How long are these upgrades supposed to last versus getting us off fossil fuels in the building?
I can start with this, Rob. We deliberately stayed away from the boiler. The boiler in the building is the fossil fueled heating component. We know that we need to move towards a non-fossil fuel solution. We didn't want to start something that we couldn't finish as part of this project. The interesting thing is the boiler, although it's one of the oldest pieces in the HVAC system, is working relatively well, but it's the thing that we want to get rid of, and to meet the town's sustainability and climate action goals. One reason that we did that was cost. One other reason, as Rob had alluded to, is that the town is looking to identify other funding sources that could be focused specifically on that boiler system. So there was a reason to leave that aside right now, because functionally, the need wasn't as great as some of the other improvements. We think that there's other funding available, and we don't want to touch something without implementing the solution that we know that the town really wants to implement, which is a non-fossil fuel-based solution. The HVAC improvements that we're talking about improving, basically restoring the capacity of the ducts in a lot of places and right-sizing the capacity of the ducts. There are some places where they were designed incorrectly. There are some cases where they were designed correctly, but then pieces of the duct system had been cut out and modified over time. That by itself will help to diminish fossil fuel reliance a bit, because there are inline heating systems that are intended to supplement what the existing boiler system can do. So we're going to be shaving a little bit off of that boiler load, but we're not getting rid of the boiler entirely as part of this phase of the project. Yeah, we know it's an item that needs to be addressed, but we couldn't find a way to address it as part of this current project.
And just to make sure, whatever we're doing here, when the boiler does get replaced, will not need redone. It will be fully integratable with whatever new boiler system we have to do that gets us off fossil fuels.
Correct. Really, what we're focusing on is the air handling component and the cooling component of the system. The heating system in the building is a hot water heating system for the most part currently, and that would have to have an alternative source of heat to heat the water if we're not going to be on a gas-fired boiler.
Thank you.
Andy.
Yeah, previous question had brought up the point that is not increasing the amount of space within the building. It's for any existing programs. It's just moving things around as we do the other renovations. But the one piece that will eventually become available under our current planning is the Civil War tablets would move to the library. And I was curious, as you talk to the departments, did you do anything to think about um, what would be the priorities for that space when it becomes available?
I don't believe we did because I don't believe we did at this point. We really focused on trying to purpose the space that we had available to us today as much as we could, or as well as we could. Um, I know we looked at an alternative. If for some reason the Civil War tablets didn't move, might there be a better place to put them within the building where they might be more visible to the public, more accessible, et cetera, those types of things. We had sort of we went around that a little bit to see what opportunities there might be. But in terms of making that, you're right, there's 1,500 square feet of space available in that room that currently is dedicated to the Civil War tablets, and that creates some great opportunities. But we didn't look at putting anybody or anything into that at this time.
Bob and Dave, or Dave, if that's a follow-up, and then Bob. Bob.
Okay. This is more to assist me in explaining to people what we're spending our money on. When was the building built? Number one. And number two, how much kind of renovations, investments have we made in the building over the years? Is this something that we have to do because the building is just too old, and our systems are just too old? Or is this really something that we choose to do because we want to improve the quality of life when people are there in the building?
Is Rob still with us?
And Dave's got his hand up. I don't, who wants it? So there are three. When was it built? How much have we invested? And is this essential? Are we making a choice? And
Yeah,
I guess
so
if I could reword that, is this a very extremely high priority? Or are we choosing to make it a priority?
yeah, the building has a couple different dates with additions, but generally 1950, and then late 1970s was the next major alteration. And not much happened until the Musanti Health Center was built just a few years ago. So there's been very little major, effort to renovate or update the building as time went on. So, this building, for the size of the building, it's one of our largest on the town side, not taking into account the school buildings. And it's missing all the major systems. It has no life safety systems. It has no sprinkler system. It has a faulty, barely functioning fire alarm that's completely outdated and obsolete in many ways. And then we've talked enough about the HVAC. So it's a candidate for this type of an investment. It's a building that still has life left to it, that has a future, has a potential to be a usable space. It's not our DPW. It's not our central fire station that's deteriorated to the point where we can't do anything for it anymore. This building can still have a lot done for it. And with the facilities conditions assessment that I spoke about earlier, we're really hoping, kind of the new approach to the facilities management is to lay out a plan for the 10, 15 years into the future on how to bring buildings like this along and keep them in good condition and usable, and not have to talk about replacing them any sooner than we have to.
Dave, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Very briefly, and I'll just build on something Rob said and something Paul said, I believe, at the council meeting recently. And I think Paul had asked the question, and Rob just touched on it moments ago, is this building worth it? And I think Rob just summed it up very nicely, but Paul had posed that question, I think, to all of us. And I think the entire team, as you look at the current departments that are in that building, the function of the building, how central it is, as Rob said, this isn't a building not to, focus on DPW or Central Fire, but those buildings have lived beyond their useful life for the town. This building has many, with the proper reinvestment, has decades of useful life left. This, in my opinion, I've said it on a lot of the meetings with Rob and Bob and Jeremiah LaPlante. This is really the first systematic look at all of the functions of the building, both the inadequacies and what is working in perhaps decades. So, great kudos to the whole team and bringing on this incredible architectural firm. It really does set the stage for the future. Yes, Bob had said moments ago, well, why do we say we're doing this? In order to have useful space in that building for decades to come, we really have to do this work first. And I look at this as kind of a first phase of reinvestment in the building. And honestly, this is kind of the new reality. And as we get all the building assessments that Rob has spoken about, we're going to find that many of these systems, like in Bangs, like in Town Hall, need to be upgraded or completely replaced. And it's going to be a little sticker shock. But once we get it done, then we can move forward and begin to look at more closely what are the space needs of the senior center, of health, et cetera. So those are the 3 or 4 points I wanted to make. It is a significant number, but it's a building that we want to reinvest in. Thanks.
I'm looking around to see if there are any other questions, requests for information, comments. As I understand it, there was some sense of, I won't say urgency, but of timing for us to be reviewing this because it's ready to go out to bid. Is that correct? I mean, go out to bid in March, not like tomorrow, but once this order comes back to the council. Is that correct?
Yes, I have
I think
documents. I have to
I
do a
think I'm
final.
seeing heads nodding, yeah. Andy,
Is a motion in order at this point? If so, I would make a motion.
I think so. That's why I was asking that if we're ready to make a decision on what we're recommending to the council, then a motion is in order.
Well, I'll put a motion out then that the finance committee recommend to the council adoption of order FY 2505F.
I'll second.
And I'll get the wording of that later. Today is, yeah, I can write up at least this portion for a review. So are people ready to vote? Bob, I see your hand is
Yeah, I
up.
just have one comment. I mean, I completely support this, the motion, but I do want to caution that we're going to have to very carefully explain to the residents of the town that we're not really changing the appearance of the building that much. That everything that we're going to do is going to be, it's not going to increase any, space, et cetera, et cetera. We just have to explain it. I understand we have to do these things in order to preserve the building. I get it. But these things, the residents are not getting what they've asked for with this money. And we just need to explain it to them.
Mandy.
I just wanted for people who might watch this video, some announcement of when the public forum on this will be at the council.
No.
Will there be a public forum on that? I'm just not sure on this financial order, Paul. Yes.
There must be, because of an appropriation, so there will be a public forum. It's up whenever the council decides. It won't be obviously the notice, probably March 10th, I think, maybe if we get I think there's time to do it for March 10th.
March 10th. Is that the next?
You have to
That
post
would
for
be-
10 days. There's posting requirements.
So that would give us a little bit of time to get a report in as well.
Sure.
Then, rather than trying to get it in by Monday.
Absolutely.
Bernie,
Really quickly, this is about usability of the building. It's about making the building more comfortable, more accessible, and safer all the way around. So, and it's, again, it's really basic work that needs to be done before you can move on anything else. So I'm supporting this.
so, I think following up on what Bob said in terms of the public presentation, you have one line on ADA, but trying to say more about that what we're doing about the climate comfort of the place, and that in the background is a potential expansion of space, because this was always built as senior center. I mean, it was built as Bangs, but senior center, but talking a bit more about that would be useful.
I can work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we're ready to put this to a vote. I will just call out names as I see them on the screen. Andy?
Yes.
Kathy is a yes. Mandy?
Aye.
Bernie?
Support.
Bob?
Aye.
Tom?
Support.
And Elisha?
Yes.
So it is unanimous with both residents supporting it. And I will watch the tape so I can write this up. So I thank everyone. The next item on the agenda is minutes. And although there were 8 sets of minutes or 10 sets of minutes posted, we only had 4 to review. And Bob reviewed all of them and made either minor edits or corrections. And Bob, if you want to speak to it, I'm just going to recommend we approve them as a set, and tell us which ones were the ones you reviewed.
Yeah, I reviewed I believe it was the March 3rd, March 10th, April 2nd, and May 3rd meetings. It's the ones that are in Word on the SharePoint site. Let me just.
And I think it's the 5th, the 19th, April 2nd. It's the same group that was in last week's, but we can.
It's the same one we had last week. I reviewed them and changed some wording of some things, but didn't change any of the meaning. So.
And just so people know, we didn't have the others. So Bob and I had both volunteered to review minutes, but we don't have the others that were listed on this agenda. They weren't available either in SharePoint or in the posting. So we will do our best to catch up. Andy, I see you have either question or a comment.
Were the minutes that were posted in the current packet with revisions that were made? And because I did review them again today, and have several suggestions, but they're minor. I think we can finish it out.
I don't know the answer to that question, because as I think people know that there was staff were out sick over the weekend. So I gave Melissa a link to the SharePoint versions that Bob had edited. So Andy, if you just want to send them to me, what I'd like to do is try to get through the backlog of these minutes as rapidly as we can. And if they were fairly minor, we'll just make them and then give you the approved set next week so they can be posted as final.
That would work. There were things, one was eliminating a paragraph in one. There was a reference to an MMA webinar that was an incorrect reference. Things like that that seemed significant enough to point out, but would not require any real significant rewriting.
So I guess, Bob was the one who did the review. So if you would send those to him, and I see Mandy's hand is up, maybe we can at least get those 4 sets completed and try to get the others with track change in them put into a couple of Bernie doesn't have access to SharePoint, and I don't know whether Tom Porter, so I want to make sure we get them into the packet, not just in SharePoint. Mandy.
Yeah, it would be great if Andy could summarize all of the changes, so that when we make the motion, we can make the motion for as amended, as discussed at the meeting or something. So that the motion, so that they can be fixed, but that we've heard what all the changes are.
So Andy, if you tell us which set of minutes you said one was an MMA change and one was eliminate a paragraph. Just tell us which dates they were.
Let me just see if I can get my on my own screen what I need to have because it wasn't clicking. On March 5th, I think these are the kinds of things that may have been caught already. But there were several things on there. Under number 5, it said O'Keefe clarified that the town manager would stand up a committee to consider, and it should be set up a committee or appoint a committee, but stand up a committee doesn't make sense. And then later in the same paragraph, it says members discussed including the report, the likely creation for a reuse committee is probably of a reuse committee. And what I was referring to is, and then there was just before the words adjourn, Kubiak added background on the establishment of the charter school formula. And I wasn't sure if he meant it was meant charter school formula or chapter 70 formula. So that was that set of minutes, just since you're asking me to tell you what they are. In the meeting let's see, the March 19th meeting, there was under CPAC report, it said the council discussed proposing an additional motion. And I'm not sure if it should have been the committee discussed proposing, because there wasn't that end as a matter of a form. There was later in it, it refers to former acting superintendent Slaughter as a meeting was scheduled for April 1st for Doug to discuss. And I was going to just suggest something be added, either Douglas Slaughter or acting superintendent Slaughter. So that was that one. As you can see, these are things that are not monumental changes, but things that just struck me as I was reading through. There was one paragraph in the minutes of April 2nd, which for various reasons, I'm being quoted as saying something, and I don't recall saying it, plus it's worded in the with gender references that seemed incorrect. So that was the one that was there. And I think that the final thing is that there was and I can't remember which minutes this was, recommendation about going to a webinar that MMA put on, and it says about charter school funding, and it was actually about chapter 70 funding. So those were the kinds of things they were, why I say they're not major as far as changes are concerned.
So my suggestion, Andy, would be they're available in Word they're available in SharePoint in Word. If you would just make those changes with track edits, then we can, if that, Mandy, if you're okay with that, then we could go ahead and do these minutes. You know, I saw some of those were caught, but not all of them were caught. So we could make those changes and approve this set. Mandy,
I was gonna make the motion.
great.
I move to approve the minutes of the March 5th, 2024, March 19, 2024, April 2nd, 2024, and May 3rd, 2024 meetings as amended and discussed at today's meeting.
Shane seconds. We'll take a vote. Andy,
Yes,
Kathy is yes. Mandy,
Aye.
Bernie,
I support, but I want to note that I was not present at the April 2nd meeting.
okay. Bob,
Aye.
Tom,
I was not present for any of those. I began attending later in the year. I'm not uncomfortable with anything I've heard or read, though.
okay, and Elisha.
Yes.
Okay, so those are approved. What I hope to do with these minutes is get
uh,
a set. Pardon, did I miss someone?
no, I just wanted a clarification. You want to send to Bob Hegner?
I think I called on Bob. Did I not call on Bob?
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
no, the question is where you want me to send the track change versions.
The
I think they'll just repost. I think they're on
When-
a SharePoint.
when you work on SharePoint, the changes just get embedded right away, Andy. If you want me to, I figured out a way to download them as Word and I can send them to you.
No, I got it. I'll do that.
Okay. So what I propose going forward on the minutes is that we try to get the set so we can look at them. And that if anyone who has the time and inclination to read them carefully, we have Zoom meetings, so we can always cross-check, but we have a really big backlog of minutes, and I'm going to try to work with Athena to get as many in front of us and to make the minute review efficient. Bob and I have volunteered, and we'll do the best we can to double check them for these kinds of errors and then rely on all of you and just vote for them as sets to try to expedite.
Yeah,
Good.
this won't work for Tom or Bernie, but you know, if you just get on the SharePoint site and make edits and track changes, it'll automatically save for everyone to see. So
Mandy has her hand up.
I think that would be a violation of open meeting law because that would be considered deliberation if you're changing stuff with not in an open meeting.
So what I'll have to do is once they get posted, I'll make sure people get a copy of them. That's the best we can do. And once if they get posted in the packet, they become PDFs usually. They're not Word versions, but once we get them, we can do our best to get them with any track change to everyone. With trying to, these are well recorded. So the other thing that people may have noticed, we put public comments to the end of this agenda, and I'm going to ask just people can send me their remarks on whether they prefer them at the end or not. But if we're ready, I would like to open it up for public comments. I'm not seeing any objections to it. So we are open to public comments. I'm not seeing any hands up. So without public comments, I think we have finished for today. What I'm going to give Melissa to share with everyone, or we can post it, is a schedule from now to the end of the year, which we agreed on we agreed on the Tuesdays, we're gonna meet every month, first and third. But when we get into May, we meet more frequently for budget oversight, and I'd like to make that a topic for the discussion next time. So, but just people will see a draft when we're meeting, and I'll meet with Melissa to also talk about what topics we're gonna have to cover over this next several months. Bob?
Yeah, I would just suggest that we post public comments earlier in the meeting, like for the first action item, because I happen to notice that we had 7 or 8 people. Some of them were Dave, and so I don't know how many people, actual residents we had in the audience, but we only had 3 at the end.
Okay. So we'll switch it back. That, there was this, Melissa asked me, and I said, fine. With elementary school building, we've done it at the end, but I agree. People can come on and make their comments and then leave. So we'll switch it back to the
Okay.
top. Any other comments before I ask for? I'll make a motion to adjourn. Then I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Andy,
Yes.
Kathy. Yes. Mandy is a yes.
Mandy's an I.
Bernie,
Yeah, I support.
Bob,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Elisha.
Yes.
We are adjourned at 3:52, and we will try to get you an agenda for the next meeting as soon as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.